Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the 18th of July 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up today's Steam deals. As always, these deals do last for 48 hours, which means if you missed yesterday's, they can go and check out yesterday's Salebox for a roundup of everything there. Most prices in Australia are the same as the prices in the US, so I will only list the Australian prices if they happen to differ from the usual dollar amount. And there are two titles this time around that do. Okay, so let's kick it off, shall we, with SimCity 4. 70% off. Takes it down to $6, €3, and £3. SimCity 4 is arguably the best in the series as far as I'm concerned. Far, far better than its more recent incarnation. This also happens to be the deluxe edition, which comes with the Rush Hour expansion. It is, of course, a city-building game, as you might imagine. Excellent level of detail. Plenty of mods available for this game. It has a thriving modding community, and as a direct result, there was an awful lot of content available there. It's very difficult not to recommend it, quite frankly. However, please do bear in mind that this game is actually quite old. It's in fact, if you can believe it, 10 years old. That means that it has suffered a number of compatibility issues with recent operating systems. Thankfully, there is a way to deal with this. If you head on over to PCGamingWiki.com and search for SimCity 4, what you'll find is a couple of programs, one called SC4 Launcher and the other called NAM Network Add-on Mod. SC4 Launcher has a bunch of tweaks. That will fix most of the issues. I would strongly suggest that you go and deal with that. Once you've got all of that installed and working, you should be having a grand time because it is one of the best city-building games that has ever been made. Far Cry 3, 40% off, takes down to $24, €18, £12, and the Australians, for once, get a better price than the US at $20 Australian dollars 96. So well done to you guys. It's like the first and only time you haven't been screwed over this sale. Okay, so this also includes Blood Dragon at the same discount, which is certainly what I would recommend picking up. Far Cry 3 is really, really good. It was one of my favorite games last year. It's got a decent-ish plot, but the real joy of it is the open world and driving around a well-realized island causing havoc. That's what the game is good at. I wouldn't really go too far into the story and the character development because it doesn't really match up to that. Admittedly, the antagonist is pretty damn good, so that's something you should consider. Probably one of the more interesting villains in the last few years. Gunplay is pretty solid as well. The character development in terms of the skill trees could have been better, but it's pretty good. And the game does have quite a few fairly irritating sort of fetch quests and things like that, but a lot of it is optional. So, yes, I would recommend Far Cry 3. It's an absolutely great game. Blood Dragon, the Expandalone, is a nice homage to 80s action movies and is a nicely cut down and focused version of Far Cry 3 in a post-apocalyptic 80s sci-fi universe. And it's pretty damn good for what it is, so I would definitely go for that. The deluxe edition you can skip. It doesn't really offer all that much. Basically, it adds a few extra weapons and some fairly lame missions, so I wouldn't really worry too much about that if you're looking to save some money there, because that does push the price up to $30 your regional equivalent, which is not that great. If you're on a budget, Far Cry and Far Cry 2 are also on sale with heavy discounts. Far Cry 2 is actually alright. Like, some people will argue that it's got a lot of problems, and I wouldn't disagree with them. Honestly, I wouldn't. But it is pretty good. If you can get past the annoying checkpoint system, as well as the irritation of constantly having to deal with having malaria, it's actually a pretty damn good time. And for the cost, it may be worth investing in if you're looking for something a little bit cheap and cheerful and you don't have the money to throw at Far Cry 3. It's still a pretty good game. The flamethrower in that game is hilarious fun. There's even a little bit extra depth in there, including the condition of weapons and jamming and things like that you don't find in Far Cry 3. So, it's not bad. Different setting as well, happens to be in Africa. Infestation Survivor Stories, 75% off. That's $3.74, €3.74 in Tier 1, $3.24 in Tier 2, and £2.74. Big, gigantic, red, flashing warning sign with sirens and klaxons and everything. This is the War Z. They just renamed it because they had to get rid of the War Z name due to trademark infringement. As you might imagine, their trademark was denied because, of course, stuff like World War Z already exists. It's far too close to that. They renamed it Infestation Survivor Stories, and there's some real funny business going on with this, I've got to say. This is a game that was originally removed from Steam for being such a goddamn mess that Valve refused to sell it. It was fairly rapidly put back on the store, and it's also had its Metacritic score removed from its page, which is very suspect. This is a game that was guilty of false advertising upon launch on Steam, claiming a bunch of features that didn't actually exist, and it's quite frankly a clumsy, bug-ridden, hack-ridden mess with very little in terms of cheat protection, very little in terms of content development, and a complete void of originality. It is astonishingly awful. It really is, and you should be avoiding it at all costs. I know, it's a genre that we don't have enough games in yet. People want the true survival experience. This is not the game to get it in. Please do not fall for it. You've got a very dishonest development house behind it, constantly broken promises, outright lies, and a really badly made experience. Just don't. No, don't subject yourself to it. Don't convince yourself that it's okay for $3.74. There's loads of other games you could get for that are way, way better. Think about that. Your time is more valuable than you claim it is. Magicka, 75% off, takes it down to $2.49, €2.49, £1.99. This has been on sale so many times, it really seems ridiculous to repeat myself on it, but for the sake of completeness, it is an isometric action game with an emphasis on co-op with about a 4 to 5 hour campaign or so, and a rather hilarious spell system which allows you to combine elements into different spells, and let's just say there's a little bit of a tendency to blow up your friends in this game. That's probably the strongest thing about it. It has a good sense of humor, but it's the emergent gameplay and what can happen when you combine these volatile elements together with potentially explosive results that really gets the laughs. It's a very original title, and I would highly recommend it for co-op play. You can get a 4-pack for the cost of 3 copies. DLC-wise, there is a huge amount of DLC for this game. You can dodge most of it. The really solid DLC for this is The Other Side of the Coin, The Stars Are Left, and Magicka Vietnam. Those are the really big story DLC add-ons that actually add new levels and genuine campaign stuff. The rest of it's mostly just multiplayer levels for the PvP mode and various different random items. Grimnir's Laboratory is okay if you're just looking for some wave-based stuff, but yeah, those would be the 3 DLC that I would grab, and they're all 75% off as well. Phenomenal game, just a little bit of a warning about this title. As good as it is, it's still a bit buggy, nowhere near as much as it used to be, and it also doesn't work on laptops with integrated graphics because the engine doesn't support that. So I would strongly recommend you don't buy it for a machine that has that. Aside from that, though, it's absolutely fantastic, and I would strongly recommend it. Xcom, 75% off, $10, €10, £7.49. Sorry, Australia, it's $17.49 over in the land down under. Ouch. Whatever the case, this is the biggest discount I've seen on Xcom so far, which certainly perks my interest. This is a game that I was in two minds about. I've played a huge amount of this game. I think I clocked 95 hours in it, which is definitely the longest that I've played any game, I think, in the last couple of years. That should be an endorsement, but it isn't. That's the kind of annoying thing about it. The thing about XCOM is that I loved the series prior to this, of course, you know, XCOM UFO Enemy Unknown and Terror from the Deep and even Apocalypse I thought was actually really, really good. And this game shows a lot of promise, but at the end of the day, I stopped playing it because it got to the point where I was just absolutely sick of the nonsense that this game threw at you, and there's some design decisions that I really dislike, unfortunately. It's mostly down to the way that the actual aiming works in that game, and the fact that it's not entirely possible or indicated as to whether or not you are actually moving into a position where you'll be able to get a clear shot. The game has a 2-movement system with no undo feature, which means that if you move into a position where you think you've got a clear shot at an enemy and it actually still ends up being in hard cover, you've basically wasted a move and you could have put yourself in grave danger. It's really lousy. Also, the game has a tendency of shooting through walls with the AI, which is really irritating, and I experienced basically every bug that game had to offer, including game-breaking stuff that got my entire squad killed. So I think it made a lot of right choices, but it made several incorrect ones, and as a direct result, It's difficult to recommend at full price. At 75% off, though, yeah, it's pretty damn fantastic. And as much as I would recommend the Iron Man mode, which I think is the true way to play the game, because it's still a bit buggy and because those systems are in place where there is no undo and you don't necessarily know whether or not you're moving into a position where you can get a clear shot at an enemy target, I would play without it on so that you can at least reload the save if the game decides to BS you with some ridiculous nonsense, which it does do from time to time. Aside from that, though, a very atmospheric, challenging interpretation of Xcom, and my hope is that we actually get some worthwhile DLC for it, but as it stands, the only DLC is Slingshot, and that is rubbish, and I wouldn't even bother picking it up. The Incredible Adventures of Van Helsing, 50% off. That's $7.50, €7.50 Tier 1, $5.49 in Tier 2, and £6. So this title is an action RPG in the Diablo or Torchlight vein. However, you only play as Van Helsing. You also have a ghost companion. I found the combat in this game to be particularly dull. Also on launch, it was very bug-ridden. I had a lot of problems with my code for that game. It has been mostly patched up recently. The strength of this game, I think, is the storyline and the immersiveness of the world, yeah? And that, to me, is not that important, because I'm the kind of person that focuses on mechanics and how good the combat system is versus how good the story is. A lot of people like the game because of the interaction between the main character and the ghost, and also because of the really cool sort of monster hunting world you put into. I disliked the game because I found the combat system astonishingly monotonous, and there wasn't anywhere near enough weapon variety in that game to keep me interested. The problem with games like that, I suppose, is that you usually have a bunch of different classes that all play completely differently. And in this case, you have a bunch of talent trees that kind of make you a different class, but one way or the other, you're still going to be a sword fighter or a pistol dude. I do like the way that they dealt with the AI companion. Basically, they treated the ghost kind of like a pet in Torchlight, but they actually enhanced it quite significantly and put some interesting systems in and some synergies between you and the ghost character. It's got a lot of interesting ideas, and it's a well-realized world, but I just got too bored of the combat to continue, which kind of sucks. If you are into that kind of combat system, which I never really was to begin with, you can deal with the repetitive nature of it. I think it's actually a pretty good game. Unfortunately, I can't, and as a result, I didn't enjoy it. So there you go, a bit of a mixed recommendation on that one. Euro Truck Simulator 2, 75% off, $10, €7.49 and £6.24. I have to admit, I usually don't even touch these simulator games, mostly because there's this irritating bandwagon on YouTube where people just play all the simulator games for comic effect and things like that. But Euro Truck Simulator is actually the one that people have been saying is good, and I did actually play a bit of it. And I gotta admit, actually, yeah, it kind of was. It was well realized, it was graphically impressive, the interface is really good, it's really polished, it's got a lot of content in it, and it seems to treat the subject matter seriously, but also have a little bit of a lighthearted nature to it, saying, yeah, you know, this is a game about driving trucks. But it's a damn good game about driving trucks, and it was surprisingly refreshing. I didn't get into it in the way that other people did, where they just played for days and days and days, but if you're going to pick up a simulator game, this is one of the best, and that's perhaps the biggest endorsement I can give to it. It's still a game about driving trucks, and I don't want to spend my time doing that, but some of you might. So there you go. Garry's Mod, 75% off. That's $2.49, €2.49 in Tier 1, $1.99 in Tier 2, and then £1.49. So this is the standalone pay-for version of the Physics Sandbox mod that was, well, named Garry's Mod, and it doesn't really have a point, per se. The whole reason that the game exists is to allow you to join objects together and make weird stuff, and it's often used for machinima works and videos and things like that. There's a lot of crazy, wacky stuff that you can actually do in it, and there's a lot of models that are in from games like TF2 and Half-Life. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see the appeal. I don't want to play something like that at all, but I can certainly see why people would want to play around with it. You know, it's one big sandbox toy, and there's a lot of potential for creativity, and I can definitely respect that. So if you are looking to get into that, and you're actually willing to learn how the physics actually work in that title to create stuff that's interesting, then you may wish to go for it. Just bear in mind that playing on public servers is often something that will cause you problems because it is a little bit griefer prone. I would play with friends if you're going to play with anybody, as otherwise your creations might get messed up, which is not ideal. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, 50% off, that's $20, 30 euros. What? You gotta be having a giraffe there, mate. And £20, also screw that. No way. It's yet another example of the Call of Duty franchise trying to sell its older titles for fairly pitiful discounts, quite frankly. A 3-hour or so single-player campaign that is almost entirely on rails, no FOV slider, no real PC-specific options of any description, poor multiplayer that only allows you to use dedicated servers in unranked mode. Oh god. Yeah, everyone has moved over to Black Ops 2, and with good reason, because it's a lot better. I mean, that even has a better single-player mode, as far as I'm concerned. Infinity Ward always took themselves a little bit too seriously, and Modern Warfare 3, I think, is kind of the culmination of their hubris, really. They also have the audacity to still charge full price for all 4 of the map packs, which that's $60 worth of map packs. Oh, Jesus Christ. No, I definitely would not recommend this. It is a company that has historically been disrespectful of PC gamers, has made lousy PC ports, and as a direct result, as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't be rewarding them with your money. And that brings me to the deal of the day, which I think a lot of people saw coming. That is Torchlight 2, 75% off, the biggest discount this title has seen so far. $5, €4.74, £3.74. This is the best Diablo clone that I have ever played. It helps, of course, that it's developed by the people that were responsible for Diablo 2, a lot of the ex-employees of Blizzard North. It is better than Diablo 3 as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't have a great story, don't get me wrong, but neither did Diablo 3, so that's not really saying much. It has fantastic combat, it's got some really well-developed classes, some extremely entertaining combat, and very, very good loot. It's one of the few games of this type that I actually enjoyed the combat in, mostly just because there's so much impact behind everything you do. Enemies just come to pieces in giant chunks, loot flies everywhere, there's gold all over the screen. It's got some excellent monster variety and plenty of stuff to do in that title, and there is actually a good modding scene now that they've released the modding tools. The best mod for that game, as far as I'm concerned, is called Synergy, which adds a brand new class as well as a whole bunch of extra content and raids and things like that. It is a phenomenal total conversion, and I would strongly recommend this game to pretty much anybody. Unlike the original, it does have multiplayer. It also has 4 classes rather than 3, and it's just better than the original in pretty much every way. So please, please do engage in this title. You will have a blast if you have even a passing interest in Diablo-style isometric action RPGs. Alright folks, that wraps me up for the Salebox. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.